Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we travel into the frozen heart and forgotten corners of Canada, a land of isolated small towns, endless wilderness, and places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing and terrifying horror stories ever reported. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Canada, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Moore, and this happened when I was 29 during a winter drive through northern Canada that was supposed to take one night, just one. I wasn't chasing adventure. I wasn't filming content. I was driving home after a failed job interview, tired, bitter, and desperate to get back before another storm hit. The GPS warned me about road closures, but I ignored it. Locals always exaggerate winter danger. That's what I told myself as the last gas station disappeared behind me, and the road narrowed into a ribbon of black ice cutting through endless trees. No cell service, no radio signal. Just the sound of my tires grinding against frozen asphalt. About 40 minutes in, I noticed something strange. Every kilometer marker read the same number. I slowed down, convinced I was misreading it. But the next one, and the next, were identical. That was the moment the road stopped feeling like a road and started feeling like a trap. I told myself it was just fatigue. Long drive, low light. Your brain plays tricks when the world turns white and empty. Still, I slowed to a crawl and rolled down the window, letting the cold stab my face just to feel something real. The air smelled wrong, sharp, metallic like frozen pennies. Another kilometer marker slid past my headlights. Same number, same scratches carved into the metal. I checked the odometer. It was moving. The fuel gauge was dropping. Time was passing. But the road wasn't changing. That's when I saw the footprints. They crossed the road from left to right, half buried by snow, too large to be human and too deliberate to be animal. They ended at the tree line, and none came out the other side. I stopped the car without meaning to. The engine idled, loud in the silence, and for a second, I thought I heard breathing outside. Slow, patient, close. I locked the doors and whispered, "Nope," like that could undo anything. When I drove again, the headlights caught a sign ahead, "Welcome back." I stared at the welcome back sign for a long time, trying to remember if I had ever passed it before. I was sure I hadn't. There was no town marked on my map anywhere nearby, no rest stop, no detour, just forest, endless forest. I drove past the sign, heart hammering, and within seconds the road dipped sharply downhill. My headlights caught something ahead, another car parked crookedly on the shoulder. Its hazard lights blinked weakly, half frozen in slow motion. Relief hit me so hard I laughed out loud. Other people meant logic. It meant answers. I pulled over behind it and stepped out, my boots crunching in the snow. The car door on the other vehicle was open, swaying gently. Inside, the seats were empty, coated with a thin layer of frost, like it had been abandoned for hours. Maybe days. Then I noticed the driver's side window. Scratched into the glass, deep and frantic, were the words, "Don't turn around." I don't know why. Curiosity, panic, instinct, maybe the road wanted me to. My breath caught as my headlights swept across the trees behind me. At first, I saw nothing. Just snow-laden branches and shadows stretching too long. Then one shadow moved when the others didn't. It stood just beyond the tree line, tall and bent at the shoulders, its outline wrong in a way my brain refused to fully process. No eyes reflected the light. No face. just a darker absence where something should have been. It didn't charge. It didn't creep closer. It simply leaned forward, as if listening. The air grew heavy, pressing against my ears, and suddenly my phone buzzed in my pocket. 1 bar of signal, impossible out here. A text message appeared on the screen from an unknown number. You stopped again. The figure shifted, and I realized, with sick certainty, it wasn't watching me. It was waiting for me to move. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I slid back into my car as quietly as possible, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the keys. The engine roared to life, louder than it had any right to be. And for a split second, I was certain that sound alone would be enough to draw it closer. I drove, faster than I should have, faster than the ice allowed. The trees blurred into a single black wall on either side of the road, and the headlights felt weaker now, like they were being swallowed by the dark instead of cutting through it. Every few seconds, I checked the mirrors, expecting to see something running behind me. But there was nothing. That almost made it worse. The road straightened, then curved, then straightened again in a pattern that felt deliberate. I passed the same kilometer marker, same number, same scratches. Again. My radio crackled suddenly, bursting to life with static, and beneath it, faint but clear, a voice whispering my name. Not calling, correcting me. The whisper stopped as abruptly as it began. Silence rushed back in, thick and suffocating. I told myself it had been interference, some broken signal bouncing off the terrain. I told myself a lot of things that night. The road dipped again, and this time it led to a cluster of buildings ahead, lights glowing warm and yellow against the snow. A town, an actual town. I almost cried when I saw it. The sign at the entrance was half buried, but I could make out the name, Ridgeway. I drove in, slowing as houses passed by. Every window was lit, every porch light was on. But there were no cars, no people, no tracks in the snow except my own tires. I parked in front of what looked like a diner, the kind with neon trim and fogged-up windows. The open sign flickered. Inside, I could see tables, coffee cups, movement. As my hand touched the door handle, my phone buzzed again. This is where they stopped running. The diner door opened with a soft chime that felt too cheerful for a place like this. Warm air washed over me, carrying the smell of coffee and something faintly rotten beneath it. Inside, the lights were bright, almost painfully so, and every booth was occupied. People sat in silence, hands wrapped around mugs, eyes fixed straight ahead. A woman behind the counter smiled at me. It was the kind of smile someone practices in a mirror. Perfect, empty, and held a second too long. She spoke my name without asking for it. "You made good time," she said. "You always do." I asked where I was, how long the road had been looping. No one answered. The other customers slowly turned their heads toward me in unison, their movements delayed, like a video buffering. I noticed then that none of them blinked. The woman slid a cup of coffee toward me. The surface rippled, reflecting not my face, but the dark forest behind me, as if the diner walls didn't exist at all. "Drink," she said softly. "Then you can stay." I backed away from the counter, my heel bumping into a chair. The sound echoed far too loudly, and every head in the diner snapped toward me at once. Their eyes were wrong up close, cloudy, like frosted glass, with something moving behind them, watching, learning. "I'm not staying," I said, though my voice shook. The woman sighed, almost disappointed. "You never do," she replied. "That's why it keeps bringing you back." The lights flickered. For half a second, the diner vanished. I saw the truth beneath it. Rotting wood, collapsed booths, bodies frozen in unnatural poses, skin stretched tight with frost. Then the illusion snapped back into place, cleaner than before. Hands reached for me, too many, from every direction. I bolted for the door, crashing through it and into the cold night air. Behind me, the town lights went out all at once. Ahead of me, the road waited, empty, familiar, and already marked with the same number again. I don't remember getting back into the car. I only remember driving. The road welcomed me like an old habit, smooth and obedient, stretching endlessly ahead. The town of Ridgeway was gone. No lights, no sign. Just trees and snow and that same suffocating silence. My phone buzzed again. No signal bar. No battery icon. Just a single message lighting up the screen. Almost. The kilometer marker appeared once more. But this time something had changed. The number was scratched deeper, layered over itself again and again, like someone had tried to count and failed. My odometer rolled backward. The clock on the dashboard blinked and reset to 11:17 p.m. That's when I saw myself. Up ahead, parked crooked on the shoulder, was my car. Hazard lights blinking weakly. Driver's side door open, steam rising from the hood. I slammed the brakes, heart clawing at my ribs, and understood the truth too late. I hadn't found another driver earlier. I had found myself after the road was finished with me. I'm writing this from a roadside rest area that doesn't exist on any map. The building flickers in and out like a bad memory. The vending machines hum without power. Outside, the forest waits. Patient. Every few minutes, I hear a car pass on the road. But when I look, it's always mine. Always slowing, always pulling over behind me. I try to warn them. I flash the lights. I scratch messages into signs. They never listen. Sometimes, I see the diner lights far away through the trees, glowing softly, invitingly. Other times, I see the tall shape standing where the road bends, listening for footsteps that sound like mine. The phone buzzes when the next version of me stops driving. Welcome back. If you're on a winter road in Canada and the kilometer markers stop changing, don't slow down. Don't stop. And whatever you do, don't follow the lights. Because once the road learns you, it never lets you leave. My name is Lucas Tremblay, and this happened when I was 34. During the coldest winter my hometown in northern Canada had seen in decades. I worked as a maintenance supervisor for a small hydroelectric station built beside a frozen lake. Remote, underfunded, and forgotten by anyone who didn't absolutely need to be there. The locals warned me about the lake, not in a dramatic way. Just quiet comments, long pauses. The kind of hesitation that tells you people have learned not to explain certain things out loud. They said the ice wasn't right anymore, that it carried sound. I laughed it off at first. Ice pops, it cracks, it echoes. Science explains everything. Then the calls started. Every night around 2 a.m., the emergency phone in my cabin rang. When I answered, all I heard was breathing, slow, wet, and uneven, followed by faint knocking sounds like knuckles tapping from far away. Always 3 taps, always the same rhythm. The caller ID never showed a number, only one word: lake. I reported the calls to my supervisor in the city. He told me it was probably pranksters or signal interference from the old lines running under the ice. He suggested I unplug the phone at night if it bothered me. I didn't unplug it. By the 5th night, the breathing changed. It sounded closer, clearer. I could hear water moving behind it, sloshing gently, as if whoever or whatever was on the other end wasn't on land at all. When the knocking came this time, it wasn't through the receiver. It came from beneath the floor. 3 dull thuds rose up through the wooden planks of the cabin, vibrating the legs of the table. I froze in place, staring down as frost crept along the seams between the boards. Outside, the lake groaned, a deep, rolling sound that felt more like a voice than shifting ice. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The beam cut across the frozen surface and stopped on a dark shape beneath the ice. It was directly below me, and it was moving. I stood frozen on the porch, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hands. The shadow beneath the ice shifted slowly, deliberately, as if it knew I was watching. My mind tried to reason: fish, debris, equipment. But the shape was too large, too defined, and its movements intelligent. A sudden cracking sound made me jump. The ice around the dark shape was splintering in long, jagged lines. Water seeped up, glinting in the flashlight, reflecting moonlight in a way that made the shadow appear taller, larger, almost towering. My stomach twisted. The phone rang again. I didn't answer this time. I knew the sound would be coming from below, where I couldn't see it. I could hear it through the floor now, a wet scraping, a dragging sound, as if something was forcing itself against the wood, testing for weaknesses. I stumbled back, my boots skidding on ice. The cabin walls groaned under the weight of the winter wind. But the scraping didn't stop. It was learning, searching, waiting. I decided to call for help the next morning, thinking daylight might make the lake seem less terrifying. But when I tried my phone, no signal appeared. Not one bar. Even the satellite phone I kept for emergencies displayed a single word flashing across the screen: stay. The entire surface of the lake had changed overnight. Where I had seen smooth, cracked ice, now the ice was marred with circular patterns, concentric rings that looked like ripples frozen in time. They radiated outward from a central point, the same place the shadow had been. I thought about leaving. I truly did. But when I stepped toward my truck, the wind whispered my name. It wasn't human. It wasn't mechanical. It carried the wet, hollow resonance of the lake itself. The rings in the ice started to pulse, faintly, slowly. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat. And I realized with a chill that the lake wasn't frozen at all. It was awake. I couldn't leave. Every attempt to step forward toward my truck felt like walking through thick water, though the ground was solid ice. The pulsing beneath the frozen surface was faster now, erratic, almost impatient. I could feel vibrations climbing through the soles of my boots, up my legs, into my chest. The emergency phone rang again. Trembling, I picked it up. This time, the voice wasn't muffled, faint, or hesitant. It was clear, cold, deep, as though it had existed before me and would exist after me. "Lucas, come closer." The floorboards under the cabin groaned, as if some massive weight had shifted beneath them. I glanced at the window. The ice was no longer clear. Patterns of dark veins pulsed, spreading outward, forming shapes that resembled hands, faces, and screaming mouths. I backed away, slipping on frost, but the line in the ice seemed to reach for me, beckoning. My breath fogged up, my chest tightened. Something beneath the ice wanted me. And it had been waiting a long time. I grabbed a shovel, convinced I could at least defend myself or break through the ice if necessary. Each step toward the center of the lake made the pulses stronger, synchronized with my heartbeat. I could hear them beneath me, whispering, speaking in voices that were both my own and not my own. When I swung the shovel to test the ice, the sound wasn't wood striking frozen water. It was a wet, hollow crack, as though the lake itself was breathing. The ice shifted beneath me, subtle at first, then violently, throwing me to my knees. My flashlight fell, rolling across the frozen surface, catching glimpses of something moving far below. Then the surface broke. A jagged hole opened up before my eyes, the edges cracking and groaning, revealing black water beneath. From it, a pale arm, or what looked like an arm, rose, skeletal and dripping, reaching toward me as the whispers intensified, urging, demanding. I scrambled backward, heart hammering, realizing there was no escape. Not yet. I ran. Not toward my truck, not toward the cabin. I ran blindly across the ice, the jagged hole behind me widening, water lapping at its edges as if the lake itself were breathing in rhythm with my terror. Each step felt like sinking into quicksand. Every pulse beneath the surface made the cracks widen, forcing me to leap over splitting ice and frozen ridges. The whispers followed me, growing louder, overlapping, echoing from every direction at once. They weren't just voices. They were memories. Fragments of people I had never met, screaming, begging, pleading. The lake wasn't just awake. It was alive, sentient, feeding off fear and memory. Then I tripped. The ice beneath my hands and knees groaned, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through my chest. When I looked up, I saw the water moving beneath the surface. Not just ripples, but forms, pale and human-shaped, rising slowly as if reaching for the surface. And me. I screamed, and the wind carried the reply. Finally, I scrambled toward the cabin, desperate for anything solid. The ice behind me cracked in terrifying patterns, sending splinters of frozen water shooting across the surface like missiles. The shapes beneath the ice surged forward, black and pale limbs moving in impossible directions, reaching, clawing, bending toward me with unnatural flexibility. I slammed the cabin door shut and locked it, pressing my back against it as the floor vibrated underfoot. The whispers were deafening now, overlapping my own screams in my ears. I could see shadows moving along the walls, reflections of shapes from the lake's depths crawling across the floorboards, circling, waiting. My flashlight flickered on and off, catching glimpses of the lake through the frost-covered windows. The forms under the ice weren't just shapes. They were alive, writhing, stretching, a mass of pale faces and hands, all reaching upward, all murmuring my name. The emergency phone rang. I didn't answer, but the air carried the same single word again. Come. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every creak of the cabin, every distant groan of the frozen lake made me jump. My mind kept replaying the water's pulse beneath the ice, the skeletal arms, the faces pressed against the surface as if the lake itself were watching me. By noon, I had to move. Supplies were low, and the walls of the cabin felt like a cage. I wrapped myself in every layer I had and stepped onto the ice. The frozen surface trembled underfoot as if the lake recognized me. Ripples radiated outward from the dark hole. The shadows beneath the ice twisted, elongating, and I felt them reaching into me through the soles of my boots. A voice, my own voice, but deeper, distorted, echoed across the frozen expanse. Join us. I bolted. My truck was barely visible through the white haze. But every step I took, the ice pulsed, the whispers followed, and I realized the lake wasn't just awake. It was remembering. It remembered me, and it would not let me go. I reached my truck and threw open the door, shoving everything inside. The engine roared to life, but the ice groaned beneath the tires, deep and threatening, as if warning me not to leave. My headlights caught the surface behind me, and the dark forms beneath the ice were no longer just shapes. They were faces, countless faces, pressed upward, mouths opening in silent screams, eyes following me with impossible awareness. I floored it. The ice cracked behind me in jagged lines, water spraying over the hood as though the lake itself were clawing for me. The truck skidded, nearly tipping. But I managed to regain control and escape onto a road that seemed to stretch endlessly. Now, I write this from a safe distance, but I know the lake remembers. At night, when I close my eyes, I can feel the pulse, the whisper of my name, calling me back. If you find yourself on a frozen lake in northern Canada, listen to the silence and do not answer it. My name is Sophie Larocque, and this happened when I was 27 during a solo research trip into the remote forests of northern Quebec. I was studying migratory bird patterns, which meant weeks alone in the wilderness, living out of a small, weathered cabin near the edge of a frozen lake. The locals had warned me about the fog, not about bears or wolves, but the fog. They whispered about it, eyes darting away as if saying its name aloud would summon it. I laughed it off. Fog is just fog, right? Cold, wet, slightly inconvenient, but harmless. The first night, I watched the fog roll over the lake, thick, white, and motionless. By midnight, it had crept around the cabin. I could hear my own footsteps on the wooden porch, muffled and delayed, like the fog swallowed sound and spat it back distorted. Then I heard it. Soft, almost imperceptible tapping, coming from the cabin walls. Not the trees, not the wind. The walls themselves were whispering, calling me from inside. I shook my head, telling myself it was my imagination. The cabin was old. Wood expands, contracts, creaks, logical explanations. But when I moved closer to the window, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the fog, faint shapes were moving, too tall, too thin, and unnaturally silent. They didn't run or walk. They drifted, gliding just above the ground, their outlines blurred by the mist. My breath caught. Then the tapping started again, louder this time. From inside the walls, from behind the thin wooden panels of the cabin. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. 3 sharp knocks, pause, 3 more. Slow, patient. I grabbed my flashlight and circled the cabin, shining it into every corner. Nothing. Just fog pressing against the glass, shadows flickering across the porch, trees bending slightly, though no wind moved them. When I turned back to the door, the fog outside had thickened into a wall. I couldn't see the lake, the forest, or even the ground, only white. And the feeling that something was standing right there, waiting for me to step outside. I tried to calm myself, telling myself the fog was just thick, playing tricks on my eyes. I forced my gaze toward the forest, but the trees had disappeared. The lake, the shoreline, even the porch, it was all gone, replaced by an endless wall of white that hummed quietly, almost imperceptibly. Then I heard it, the voice, low, whispering, rasping, coming from everywhere at once. It wasn't human. It sounded like hundreds of voices layered together, repeating a single word over and over. Stay. I stumbled backward into the cabin, fumbling for my journal, anything to anchor myself in reality. The fog pressed against the windows, thickening until the glass seemed to bow inward. I could see shadows moving behind it, tall figures with no faces, drifting like smoke, bending impossibly around the corners of the cabin. The tapping resumed, faster now, louder, echoing through every wall, every floorboard. It wasn't just in the cabin. It was coming from inside me. I realized then that the fog wasn't outside. It was here, it had followed me in. I tried to leave. I grabbed my coat, boots, and flashlight, but when I stepped onto the porch, the fog had thickened to the point I couldn't see my own hands. The railing vanished. The snow vanished. The lake and forest were gone. Only white, endless white, stretching into nothing. I walked forward, shivering, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. Shapes emerged from the fog, too fast, too fluid, like water bending into figures. They drifted around me, brushing my arms, whispering my name in voices that sounded like people I knew, people long dead. Each whisper pulled me in a direction I didn't want to go. Toward the lake I could no longer see. I realized the tapping wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was beneath me. The wooden boards of the porch groaned, shifting, bending as though the fog had weight, and it was trying to pull me into itself. I ran, but every step felt slower, heavier, as if the fog was learning my pace, my rhythm, my fear. I stumbled back inside, slamming the door behind me, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The fog didn't stop at the windows. It seeped through the cracks in the door and walls, curling around my ankles, cold and wet, smelling faintly of soil and decay. I grabbed my journal and flashlight and tried to record what I was seeing, hoping that documenting it would somehow ground me in reality. But the pen trembled in my hand, as if something beneath the cabin had a grip on it. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, calling me in voices that sounded like my own, distorted and pleading. I forced myself toward the kitchen window and shone the flashlight out. Shapes in the fog had multiplied. They moved with purpose, circling the cabin now, sliding above the snow without leaving footprints. Every so often, one would stop and tilt its head, studying me, waiting. I understood then, the fog wasn't just alive. It was intelligent, and it had decided I belonged to it. I knew I couldn't stay in one place. I needed a plan, anything that might give me a chance to survive. I grabbed ropes, tools, anything heavy I could use to break through a window if needed. But as I moved, the fog responded. Every step I took, the temperature dropped further, and the cabin seemed to shrink, walls bending inward. The tapping returned, but now it wasn't just on the walls. It was coming from the floor, ceiling, even the furniture. Slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat. I pressed my ear to the wood, trying to locate the source, but it was everywhere and nowhere. Then I saw it, a shadow moving just inside the fog, reaching through the window as though it wanted me. I could hear its whisper, "Step outside. It's time." My pulse thundered. I shook my head, refusing. But the fog thickened, pressing against the glass, pressing against me, urging me, suffocating me. It wasn't asking. It was commanding. I couldn't fight it anymore. The fog had entered every corner of the cabin. It slithered along the walls, curling around my legs, wrapping my arms in cold, wet fingers. The tapping had grown frantic, a rapid staccato that echoed in my skull. I realized I couldn't see the floor anymore. The fog had consumed the cabin entirely, turning it into a white void. A voice whispered in my ear, my voice, but wrong. Deeper, harsher, like a chorus of me and someone else. "Step outside, Sophie. Join us, it's warmer there." I shook violently, backing into the far wall, but my hands met nothing. The fog had replaced all surfaces with soft, shifting emptiness. Then I saw movement within it. Shapes, countless shapes, moving toward me with impossible fluidity. They were taller than trees, thinner than humans, and every step they took made the cabin groan as though it were alive. The door, the exit, it shimmered in the white nothing. I had to reach it before the fog learned my pace completely. I lunged for the door, feeling the fog resist every step. My boots sank into something soft, wet, moving under the invisible surface. Shadows swirled around me, stretching, bending as if the fog had taken the shape of the cabin itself. My hands found the handle. I yanked, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers became screams, layered over one another, dozens of voices, all mine, all demanding, pleading, threatening. Shapes drifted closer, wrapping around my vision, distorting the doorway, making it impossible to tell inside from outside. I screamed. The fog answered, curling into sharp, claw-like tendrils, pulling at my coat, my hair, my skin. I slammed my shoulder into the door again and again. Finally, with a deafening groan, it gave way. I tumbled onto the porch, or where the porch should have been, and the fog engulfed me completely. The world vanished, leaving only white, pulsing, breathing fog, and the sound of countless whispers chanting my name. I ran, but I had no idea where. I ran blindly into the fog, stumbling over unseen obstacles. The snow, if it was snow, had vanished, replaced by a shifting white expanse that rose and fell like the surface of water. The whispers surrounded me, speaking my name in every tone I'd ever known, every memory I'd ever had. Some were sweet, some terrifying. All of them demanded I stop. Shapes drifted in the fog, fluid and faceless, forming patterns that felt almost intelligent. They closed in around me, moving faster than I could comprehend. Yet I couldn't look away. The cabin's outline appeared somewhere ahead, shimmering like a mirage, but every step toward it made the fog thicken, heavier, pulling at me. I realized then the fog wasn't just outside. It had learned me. It knew my fears, my rhythm, my heartbeat. And it was shaping the landscape around me to trap me completely, to fold the world into its white, whispering prison. I had to escape. But where could I go? I finally collapsed onto what I thought was solid ground. The fog pressed around me, whispering my name in layered voices, almost caressing, almost threatening. And then I saw it. The shapes had merged into one massive, amorphous form, drifting toward me, undulating like smoke and water at once. Its whisper was everywhere, inside my head, inside my chest. Stay. Forever. I crawled forward, using instinct more than vision, and found the cabin door glowing faintly. I stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. The fog hit the walls, frozen in place, but the whispering continued, softer now, like it had been denied its prize for the moment. I write this now from inside the cabin, windows black with frost, but the fog waits outside, patient. Every night, I hear the soft tapping return, the whispering calling me closer. If you ever find yourself in the northern forests of Quebec, alone in the fog, remember, the mist isn't just weather, it's alive, and it wants you. My name is Ethan Carver, and this happened when I was 29, during my first assignment as a temporary lighthouse keeper on a remote stretch of Newfoundland's jagged coastline. The lighthouse was old, abandoned most of the year, surrounded by cliffs that plunged straight into the Atlantic. The locals called it Crag Point, but none stayed there through winter, and no one explained why. The first night, the wind howled against the stone tower like a chorus of hundreds of voices. The waves crashed against the rocks, but above all that, there was a sound that didn't belong. Metal scraping against stone, faint at first, echoing up the spiral staircase. I brushed it off, telling myself it was the wind. Then I heard the whisper, a soft, chilling voice, unmistakably human, coming from the lamp room. "Ethan, come up." I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. The lighthouse had been empty for months, or so I thought. And yet, someone or something was already waiting for me. I forced myself to climb the narrow spiral staircase, each step creaking under my weight. The scraping sound grew louder with every rotation, punctuated by faint, wet thuds echoing from above. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, the walls slick with condensation and old sea salt. When I reached the lamp room, the heavy door was ajar. Inside, the lamp itself swayed, though the wind couldn't reach it. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor. I could hear breathing, slow, wet, deliberate. Then I saw it. Marks in the dust on the floor. Long, dragging scratches leading directly to the base of the lamp. And in the faint reflection of the glass, I saw a figure. Tall, hunched, face obscured by shadows, but unmistakably humanoid. It didn't move at first. It just watched me. And then it whispered again, closer this time, wet and hoarse. "You shouldn't have come here." I stumbled back, heart racing, realizing that isolation had its own rules. And I had just broken them. I couldn't stay still. My hands trembled as I backed away from the lamp. But the figure followed, gliding rather than walking, making no sound other than a wet, dragging echo on the stone floor. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the figure seemed to stretch impossibly, long arms brushing the walls. Then I noticed the walls themselves. Etched into the stone were faces, hundreds of them, frozen in silent screams, eyes hollow, mouths open in terror. The scraping and breathing wasn't just from the figure. It was coming from the walls, from the very stones of the lighthouse itself. A sudden gust of wind slammed the lamp against the glass, creating a deafening crack. The figure's face, or what I thought was its face, pressed against the window pane. It was pale, wet, and wrong. Its whisper slithered into my ear. "They all came, and now you will too." I stumbled back down the staircase, heart hammering, knowing that leaving the room didn't mean I was safe. I reached the lower floors, but the lighthouse was no longer familiar. Hallways twisted in impossible angles, stairs looping back on themselves. Each door I opened revealed more shadows, more scratches on the floor, and whispers calling my name, layered in dozens of tones I couldn't distinguish. I thought about escaping outside, but the windows were blacked out by a dense mist that pressed against the glass. Outside, the cliffs had vanished, replaced by an endless darkness, the sound of the ocean muted under a suffocating stillness. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was isolation, exhaustion. But the dragging sound followed me, moving faster than I could run. Every time I looked over my shoulder, the figure was closer, though it had not made a step. And then it spoke from everywhere at once. "You're not leaving. You belong here," as they did. My stomach dropped. The lighthouse was alive, and I had just entered its hunger. I knew I had to keep moving. The lighthouse seemed endless now, a twisting labyrinth of stone and shadow, each step echoing unnaturally loud. The figure followed, its movements impossible, sliding across floors and walls without leaving a mark. The whispers had grown into a chorus, voices overlapping in a way that made my head spin. I reached the old storage room. Rusted lanterns hung from the ceiling, and supplies from years past lay scattered and decayed. The figure paused at the doorway, watching me, its head tilting unnaturally, as if curious. The scratching from above, the lamp room, had grown louder, and I realized it was rhythmic now, like the lighthouse itself had a heartbeat. A memory came back, one of the stories the locals whispered. Keepers never left. Those who did try were consumed, their screams absorbed into the stone, joining the chorus. I swallowed hard, realizing the lighthouse didn't just harbor secrets. It devoured them, I gripped a heavy lantern, my only weapon, and prepared to confront what came next. I forced myself up the spiral staircase toward the lamp room. Every step was accompanied by wet scraping from above, the sound growing louder with each rotation. The figure glided silently behind me, always just out of reach. I could feel its gaze, cold and probing, like it was reading my thoughts. When I reached the top, the lamp room was transformed. The lamp swayed violently, light flickering across hundreds of shadowy faces etched into the walls and ceiling. The figure now stood in the center, impossibly tall, wet and shifting like smoke. It raised one hand, pointing directly at me. The whispers had merged into one voice, clear and commanding. "You are next. The lighthouse calls." I gripped the lantern and swung, the figure dissipating for a heartbeat. But the walls themselves groaned and shifted. The lighthouse wasn't just haunted. It was alive. And it wanted a keeper. The figure reformed instantly, taller, wider, almost melting into the walls. Its whispers now assaulted me from every direction, each one a twisted echo of my own voice. "You belong here. Forever." My hands shook violently as I tried to keep the lantern steady, the flickering light throwing monstrous shadows across the room. The lamp swung wildly above me, and with each swing, the shadows on the walls above shifted. The faces etched into the stone twisted, mouths opening wider, eyes staring directly at me. The lighthouse wasn't just a building, it was a predator. The walls pulsed as if breathing, the floor vibrating beneath my feet in a rhythm that matched the whispers. I backed away, tripping over the cold stone steps. The figure advanced, gliding toward me effortlessly, its limbs bending impossibly, stretching across walls and ceiling like liquid darkness. My pulse raced. I realized there was only one way out. Confront the lighthouse at its heart, the lamp itself, before it consumed me completely. I grabbed the lamp's base with both hands and tried to hold it steady. The figure lunged, and for a moment, the room seemed to tilt, shadows collapsing in on themselves. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, layering dozens of voices into a single, unbearable scream. Then the lamp shattered. Light exploded across the room, blinding me momentarily. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone, but the walls still pulsed and groaned, whispering, breathing, alive. The etchings on the stone seemed to shift, rearranging into new faces, new screams. I knew the lighthouse hadn't been defeated. It had only acknowledged me. I had survived. For now. But I could feel it watching, patient and hungry, waiting for the next keeper to arrive. I stumbled down the spiral staircase, each step echoing through the empty tower, the wind outside howling with a sound that was part human, part animal, part stone. The lighthouse had screamed, and it would scream again. I reached the base of the lighthouse, trembling and gasping for air. The wind outside had died, leaving a heavy, unnatural silence that pressed against my ears. I thought I was safe, that the figure had vanished. But then I heard it, the low, wet scraping from above, accompanied by the faint, rhythmic heartbeat of the lighthouse itself. I stumbled toward the exit, but the door slammed shut on its own. Shadows swirled around me in the dim light, forming faces of previous keepers, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes pleading. The figure reappeared briefly in the doorway, a silhouette against the faint moonlight, its presence like a weight pressing on my chest. I realized then that the lighthouse didn't just trap its victims, it marked them. The whispers told me everything. All who stayed too long were absorbed into its walls, their essence feeding the tower's hunger until they became part of the chorus. I had to escape. I had no other choice. I threw every ounce of strength into the door, finally forcing it open. I stumbled into the cold night air, the cliffs and ocean suddenly visible again. Though the lighthouse loomed above me, dark and menacing, pulsing faintly as if alive. The whispers followed, soft now, almost a promise. "We'll wait for you." I ran without looking back, the wind biting my face, heart pounding, until the lighthouse became a distant shadow on the cliff. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest village, gasping and drenched in sweat. Even now, I can feel it watching, waiting for the next keeper foolish enough to enter its walls. The lighthouse isn't just abandoned stone and light. It's a living entity, hungry for souls, patient beyond comprehension. If you ever see a lone lighthouse along the Newfoundland coast, glowing in the mist, remember this. Some places weren't built to save lives. They were built to claim them. My name is Ryan Mitchell, and this happened during a summer camping trip in Algonquin Provincial Park, Ontario, when I was 24. I went with 3 friends, all experienced hikers. But even we weren't prepared for what we were about to face. We arrived late afternoon, setting up camp near a small, secluded lake. The forest was beautiful, calm, and deceptively quiet. Birds chirped, the wind rustled leaves, and the sun filtered through the dense canopy. But as night approached, an unnatural silence settled over the woods, as if the forest had been holding its breath. By the time we lit the campfire, the shadows were unnaturally long, stretching across the lake and into the trees. That's when we first noticed it, a shape moving along the tree line. Tall, thin, almost blending with the trees, but gliding rather than walking. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was an animal or a trick of the light. But then the whispers started, soft, unintelligible at first, but unmistakably human. And they were calling my name. We tried to brush it off, but as night fell, the forest felt different. The air grew heavier, every rustle and snap of a twig amplified into ominous echoes. My friends joked nervously, but I could see the tension in their eyes. Something was out there watching. Suddenly, one of them, Mark, pointed toward the lake. A pale, elongated figure appeared in the fogs above the water, standing impossibly still, its head tilted, following our movements without a sound. I froze. None of us had ever seen anything like it. Then the whispers grew louder, clearer. They weren't just saying my name. They were repeating phrases, fragmented sentences, as though recounting moments of my life I hadn't shared. "Ryan, you shouldn't be here. Ryan, follow." The shadows seemed to inch closer to the fire, and the cold bit harder than any summer night should allow. Something in the forest wanted us, and it was patient, waiting for us to slip up. We decided to ignore it and retreat into our tents, hoping the firelight and our presence would keep whatever was out there at bay. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, closer, circling our campsite like a predator playing with its prey. The fire flickered wildly, as though something unseen had blown over it, though the night was still. I peeked out of my tent and saw shapes moving between the trees. Not animals, not human, just shadows with lengthened limbs, gliding silently over roots and rocks, always keeping their distance, but never breaking line of sight. My stomach churned. Then I heard a blood-curdling scream. It was Mark. I bolted toward his tent, only to find it empty. His backpack and shoes remained, but he was gone. The whispers now directly in my ear. "Follow. Join us. It's safe." Panic set in. If it had taken him this quickly, there was no telling what it would do next. I shouted for the others, but my voice was swallowed by the fog and trees. Every direction I looked, I saw shapes watching me, their elongated limbs bending unnaturally as they hovered among the shadows. The whispers intensified, layering into dozens of voices, all speaking at once, taunting, calling, enticing. Sarah grabbed my arm, pale and shaking. "Ryan, we need to go." "Now," she whispered. But where? The lake had disappeared, replaced by thick fog, and the trail we had followed into the campsite was gone. Every familiar landmark was gone. Suddenly, a hand, thin, pale, impossibly long, brushed my shoulder. I spun, flashlight swinging wildly. Nothing, just fog. And the whispers, "You can't leave. You belong here." I realized with horror that we weren't just lost. We were being hunted in a forest that didn't want to let us survive, a place that warped reality and consumed those who dared to enter. We ran blindly into the forest, hoping to find the main trail, but the trees seemed to shift around us. Every step forward brought new shadows that weren't there before, twisting and bending unnaturally. The whispers followed relentlessly, now forming words we could understand. "You will stay. Forever." Branches scratched our faces and arms, though the air was still. Roots seemed to rise to trip us, and rocks shifted underfoot. I clutched my flashlight like a weapon, the beam cutting through the fog, but it revealed nothing, only the faint, flickering outlines of figures watching, waiting. Suddenly, a scream pierced the night. It was Emily. I turned just in time to see her being pulled into the fog by dozens of shadowy limbs, elongated and writhing. She vanished, with barely a trace. My stomach turned to ice. The forest didn't just consume the lost. It toyed with them first, testing, savoring. I knew we had to move faster. But where could we go when nothing seemed real anymore? We stumbled through the fog, desperate to escape. But the forest warped around us. Familiar trees became unrecognizable, paths looping back on themselves. Every time we thought we were heading toward safety, the fog thickened, and the whispers grew louder, now layered with dozens of distorted voices speaking our names. I glimpsed a figure standing on a hill, pale and elongated, arms stretching unnaturally. It didn't move, yet it somehow advanced as we ran. Sarah grabbed my hand, dragging me in the opposite direction, but the fog pulled us both toward it. Then I saw footprints, human footprints, appearing in the fog. But they led backward, looping around the campsite we had left, as though the forest itself was alive, rearranging its paths to trap us. Panic surged. I realized there was no straight escape. The forest wanted us, and every second we resisted, it grew hungrier. We stopped to catch our breath, hearts hammering, only to realize the fog had grown thicker, almost solid, pressing against us like living walls. The whispers had merged into one overwhelming voice, taunting us, repeating every fear and secret we'd ever had. It knew us intimately. From the shadows, figures emerged, tall, thin, faceless, gliding above the forest floor. They moved with terrifying intelligence, circling us, herding us like prey. Emily's scream echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once, a chilling reminder of what awaited those who lagged behind. I grabbed Sarah's hand, forcing her to run with me, but each step seemed slower, the ground shifting beneath our feet. Trees bent toward us, roots rising to trip, branches clawing at our faces. The forest wasn't just alive, it was hunting us, reshaping itself to break our spirits. The realization hit me. If we didn't confront it soon, we'd become just another set of whispers in its chorus. We stumbled into a small clearing, hoping for a moment of respite. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick fog, illuminating the glistening ground and twisted, skeletal trees. But relief was fleeting. Shapes emerged from the shadows, not just humanoid, but warped, grotesque forms, as though the forest itself had grown teeth and eyes to hunt us. The whispers now layered themselves over our thoughts, urging, threatening, promising death if we stopped. I could see our own reflections in puddles on the forest floor, distorted and pale, mimicking fear in impossible ways. We tried to run in separate directions, thinking splitting up might confuse them. But the fog resisted, bending paths back toward the center of the clearing. I heard Sarah scream behind me, then nothing. I realized with icy certainty. The forest wasn't just containing us. It was consuming everything around us, and we were next. Every instinct screamed to escape, but the forest had made one rule clear. You cannot leave alive. We ran blindly, following instinct more than memory. But the forest warped further with every step. Trees bent in impossible directions, and shadows multiplied until we could no longer distinguish friend from foe. The whispers now shouted over one another, each voice clawing at our minds, repeating our names, mocking our fear. You can't escape. You belong here. Then I saw it. Emily, standing motionless in the fog. Her head tilted unnaturally, limbs elongated, her eyes black voids reflecting the forest's malevolence. She raised one arm slowly, beckoning us, her mouth moving in perfect mimicry of our own screams. I froze, realizing she was no longer human, but a puppet of the forest itself, part of the growing chorus of lost souls. Sarah screamed behind me and vanished in an instant. I was alone, utterly alone. The fog pressed closer, and the elongated figures advanced. The forest had claimed them all, one by one, and now its hunger focused entirely on me. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing near a fallen log. The fog swirled around me like a living entity, whispering, laughing, promising the same fate as the others. Shapes circled above, below, and beside me. Faceless, elongated, inhuman. Every scream I had heard echoed inside my skull, overlapping into one endless, unbearable chorus. Then I felt it. A cold hand, impossibly long, pressing against my shoulder. I could hear Emily's voice now, merging with dozens of others. Stay, join us, forever. I struggled, crawling through the fog, each movement resisted by some unseen force. Finally, by sheer luck or desperation, I broke free, stumbling onto the main trail at dawn. The forest behind me seemed ordinary again, serene in morning light. But I knew better. The Algonquin woods didn't forget. It waits, it watches, and it still wants the ones who dare to enter. I never went camping again. I never spoke of the forest. But every summer I hear whispers calling my name. My name is Lucas Tremblay, and this happened on a frigid January night while driving through a remote stretch of Route 389 in northern Quebec. I was returning from a late-night work trip, alone in my car, with nothing but kilometers of icy road and dense forest on either side. The temperature was far below freezing, and the wind howled like a chorus of mournful spirits. At first, the night was eerily quiet, only the crunch of my tires on snow and the occasional gust of wind. But as I approached a bend, I saw something, or someone, standing on the side of the road. A tall figure, motionless, dressed in tattered winter clothing, partially covered in frost. My first thought was a stranded traveler. My second thought was that I should stop and help. Before I could react, the figure lifted its head. There was no face, only a dark void where features should have been. The headlights reflected nothing, just emptiness. My pulse spiked, and I realized this was no ordinary hitchhiker. Cue on cue, I slowed the car, hesitating, heart hammering. The figure remained still, yet I felt its gaze through the void where its face should have been. A chill ran down my spine, more intense than the frigid air outside. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, and I debated whether to reverse, drive past, or stop. Suddenly, my radio crackled with static. Then a voice, a whispering, icy tone, echoed, "Lucas, turn around. Don't go." I jerked my head, convinced it was someone messing with me, but the line was dead. There was no one else for miles. The figure took a step closer. No crunch of snow, no sound at all, just movement. Panic surged. I floored the accelerator, tires spinning on ice, and tried to drive past. But as I passed, the figure vanished, leaving only a patch of frost-covered asphalt. My relief was short-lived. Up ahead, a series of skid marks appeared on the road, leading straight into the dark forest, as though warning me what came next. I tried to shake off the feeling, blaming exhaustion and the endless monotony of the snowy highway. But then I noticed it. The trees along the road were not right. Their shadows stretched too long, bending at angles no natural tree should. The wind seemed to carry whispers, faint at first, then growing louder with each kilometer. I gripped the wheel tighter. Something was following me. A shadow flickered in my side mirror. I swerved instinctively, heart pounding, but the road remained empty behind me. My headlights caught glimpses of something darting between the trees, a tall humanoid figure, faceless, gliding over the snow. I could feel its presence pressing into my mind, cold and heavy. I wanted to stop, to call for help. But my phone had no signal. Every instinct screamed at me to keep moving, but the forest seemed endless, stretching further than any map should allow. Somewhere ahead, I sensed the danger intensifying, as though the road itself had become a trap. The whispers became clearer, almost intelligible, repeating my name in a cold, hollow tone. "Lucas, turn. Follow. Never leave." My pulse raced. I could feel my breath freezing in my throat as frost formed on the inside of the windshield. My tires struggled for traction on the ice, and every turn seemed longer, as if the road itself stretched ahead endlessly. Then I saw them, more figures emerging from the tree line, each one faceless, pale, and impossibly thin, gliding silently over the snow. They didn't move like humans. They moved like shadows, bending space around them. My headlights reflected nothing, just an empty void where features should have been. I pressed harder on the accelerator, trying to escape, but the road seemed to twist, leading me back in circles. Panic overtook me, my mind racing with the realization that I might never leave this frozen nightmare alive. The night stretched endlessly. Each turn I took felt wrong, the road folding back on itself, twisting into impossible angles. The forest on either side grew darker, denser, almost suffocating. The whispers had become a chorus now, dozens of voices layered together, repeating my name, mocking me, promising death if I stopped. "You can't escape. You belong." I glanced into my rearview mirror and froze. The shadowy figure, faceless and elongated, hovered just above the snow behind my car. Another one emerged to the left, gliding silently, its movement fluid and unnatural. Panic surged, and I swerved, tires skidding violently on ice, snow spraying in every direction. The road ahead seemed to stretch further than possible, a frozen ribbon leading me deeper into the forest. Every instinct screamed to escape. but the figures mirrored every movement I made, anticipating, relentless. I realized with a chill that the highway itself was alive, an extension of these things, guiding me into their trap. I tried to find a way off the road, but the forest seemed endless, closing in like a living wall. Every attempt to turn or reverse brought me back to the same stretch of highway, as if I was trapped in a loop designed for torment. The whispers became deafening, echoing in my skull, twisting my thoughts. You can't leave. Follow. Join us. Suddenly, the figures surged forward, gliding in perfect synchronization, surrounding the car. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, spinning on ice, the tires barely gripping the frozen road. Headlights revealed nothing, no trees, no snow, only the faceless shapes closing in, moving impossibly fast. I realized then with pure horror that my only chance was to keep moving, no matter where it led. The highway had become a predator, the forest a hunting ground, and I was the prey. Every second counted, and the shadows were patient, relentless, and inhuman. The figures accelerated, moving impossibly fast, keeping pace with the car even as I swerved around ice patches. Their faceless forms seemed to flicker, disappearing for a moment only to reappear closer, as if they could manipulate space itself. I slammed on the brakes, tires spinning uselessly on ice. But the road ahead didn't slow, didn't bend to reality. It stretched infinitely. Whispers pressed in on every side, now screaming in unison. You can't leave. We see you. You belong. My chest burned, panic clawing through my mind. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. Shadows moved in impossible ways, gliding through trees and snow, circling, herding me forward like prey. I realized with a sickening certainty, the highway was no ordinary road. It was a corridor designed to trap, to isolate, to terrify. And these figures weren't hunting me. They were guiding me to something far worse, waiting at the end of the frozen stretch. The headlights caught a clearing up ahead, or what I thought was a clearing. It was a frozen expanse, perfectly flat, surrounded by blackened trees. My car skidded into the open space, and the figures circled, silent, faceless, their movements almost liquid. The whispers became one voice, resonating deep in my skull. Step off the road, and you will join us. The ice beneath my tires shifted, cracking unnaturally, creating deep fissures that seemed to form shapes, faces, twisted and screaming, etched into the frozen ground. I could see the reflection of the figures in the ice, closer, larger, their voids blacker than night. Every instinct screamed to escape, but the horizon didn't exist. The clearing wasn't a clearing, it was a trap. I gripped the wheel, praying the car would hold traction. The forest and highway had become one living entity, a hunting ground for these shadowy predators, and I had no idea if I'd survive the night, or if anyone ever had. Panic surged as I realized there was no way forward. The car skidded uncontrollably over the ice, every turn stretching endlessly, the forest twisting around me like a living maze. The faceless figures closed in, gliding silently, their elongated limbs bending unnaturally as they surrounded the vehicle. The whispers became a deafening roar, echoing in my skull. You belong to us. Forever. You can't escape. Suddenly, the windshield frosted over, frost-etching shapes, faces of those who had disappeared before me, screaming silently, pressed against the glass. I slammed my fists against the wheel, desperate, trying to break free, but the car was trapped, the ice beneath it almost alive, gripping every tire. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw an opening in the forest, a faint glimmer of moonlight reflecting on what appeared to be the old Route 389 marker. The figures hesitated, as if bound by some rule, giving me the tiniest sliver of hope to escape. With every ounce of strength, I maneuvered the car toward the faint glimmer of moonlight. Tires screeched and spun, but somehow I broke free from the ice trap. The figures paused at the edge of the clearing, their faceless voids watching, unmoving, as if respecting some unspoken boundary. The road ahead finally stretched normally, familiar markers appearing through the snow. My hands shook violently on the steering wheel, eyes wide, heart hammering. I didn't dare slow down, not even when I reached a small village far from the forest. Even now, months later, I can still hear the whispers in my dreams, faint but unmistakable. The figures didn't follow me physically, but the memory of their presence lingers, a shadow in my mind. The frozen road of Quebec isn't just a highway. It's a predator, patient and eternal, waiting for the next traveler foolish enough to drive its icy path. I never drove Route 389 again, and I warn anyone who dares. Some roads are not meant for living. My name is Sophie Langford, and this happened when I decided to explore the abandoned St. Mary's Hospital in Vancouver, British Columbia, a place locals whispered about but never entered. I had always been fascinated by urban exploration and haunted locations, but nothing could have prepared me for what awaited inside. The hospital loomed like a decaying giant, its windows shattered, walls covered in graffiti, and a pungent mix of mold and rusted metal filling the air. I entered through a side door, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. Every step echoed across the empty hallways, amplifying the eerie silence. The deeper I went, the heavier the air felt, almost suffocating, as if the building itself were alive and watching me. Then I heard it. A faint cry, like a child calling out, echoing through the corridors. I froze, listening, but the sound disappeared as quickly as it came. My rational mind told me it was just the wind, yet every instinct screamed otherwise. I was not alone. I moved deeper into the hospital, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. My flashlight illuminated peeling paint, broken furniture, and scattered medical equipment long abandoned. Each hallway twisted unexpectedly, and every corner seemed darker than the last. The cries returned, louder this time, echoing from what appeared to be the pediatric wing. As I approached the end of the hallway, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath formed clouds in the air, and the flashlight flickered. A shadow moved just beyond the doorway. A figure of a small child, staring at me with empty, hollow eyes. I called out, but my voice sounded weak, swallowed by the building itself. Suddenly, the child vanished, leaving only a faint whisper. "Don't leave. Stay with us." Panic clawed at me. I realized the hospital wasn't just abandoned, it was trapped in some otherworldly state, feeding off fear, and I had become its newest visitor. I forced myself to keep moving, heart hammering, though every instinct screamed to run. The cries had stopped, replaced by the faint scratching of something moving behind the walls. My flashlight flickered again, and I caught a glimpse of a shadow darting across the hallway. Too fast, too fluid to be human. I reached the old nurse's station, where decades-old patient files were strewn across the floor. Most were water-damaged and unreadable, but some names stood out, with notes of disturbed behavior and sudden disappearance scrawled in faded ink. A chill ran down my spine as I realized these were real people, patients who had vanished inside these walls. The whispering began anew, soft at first, almost polite, then louder, more insistent. "You shouldn't be here. Leave or stay forever." My pulse quickened, and I felt a cold presence brush past my shoulder. Something was following me, invisible yet undeniably close. I backed into the hallway, trying to retrace my steps, but the layout seemed impossible. Hallways I had passed before now twisted in unfamiliar ways. Every door I opened revealed only more darkness, more decay, and more whispers. The air grew colder with each step, my breath fogging around me as if the building itself exhaled. Then I saw it. A figure standing at the end of the corridor. Impossibly tall, shrouded in shadow, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted. The child's voice echoed from somewhere above, laughing now, warped and distorted. I stumbled backward, heart racing, my flashlight beams shaking, illuminating fragments of faces pressed against the walls. Patients long gone, their expressions frozen in terror. I realized with terror that the hospital didn't just trap the living, it trapped the souls of the lost, feeding on them, stretching the halls, bending reality to its will. I was now part of its game, and the building knew it. I forced myself forward, each step heavy, my mind screaming to turn back. The whispers had escalated into a cacophony, dozens of voices overlapping, pleading, demanding, laughing. Stay, never leave, join us. The shadows moved along the walls, stretching and twisting as if the building itself were alive. At the end of the hall, I saw a staircase descending into darkness. Something drew me down, a mix of fear and an inexplicable pull. The stairs groaned beneath my weight, echoing through the hollow building. I could feel cold hands brush my arms and shoulders, soft but icy, leaving goosebumps in their wake. In the basement, the air was thick and suffocating, carrying the smell of rot and rust. Old surgical tables and rusted equipment littered the space, and faint scratches marred the walls. I glimpsed movement in the corner, shapes, shadows, stretching toward me, their whispers now screaming my name in unison. I understood then that the hospital wasn't just abandoned, it was hungry, alive, and aware of my fear. I stumbled backward, trying to retreat, but the basement had changed. Hallways that weren't there before twisted around me, doors opening into walls, ceilings stretching higher than seemed possible. The shadows multiplied, writhing, elongating, circling, their presence oppressive and suffocating. Then I saw the child again, floating above the floor, its hollow eyes fixed on me, lips moving in silent speech. Around it, dozens of shadowed figures rose from the ground, walls, and ceiling, forming a semicircle, observing, patient, and calculating. My flashlight flickered violently, and when it came back, some had vanished, only to reappear closer, as if the hospital itself bent space to trap me. I realized screaming would accomplish nothing. No one was coming to help. My only option was to keep moving, to find the way out, even if it meant venturing deeper into the building. The hospital's hunger was patient, and every step I took fed its game. I moved forward cautiously, heart hammering, every step met with creaking floors and whispering voices. The basement seemed to stretch endlessly, corridors twisting impossibly, shadows shifting with every turn. The child's hollow eyes followed me, and the faceless figures from earlier now floated around, circling in slow, deliberate motions. Their elongated limbs brushed the walls and floor, making the building feel alive, predatory, and suffocating. Then I saw it. The operating theater. The door was wide open, and inside, the air was icy, carrying the metallic scent of blood and decay. Surgical tools lay scattered across the floor, and the shadows of figures seemed to writhe across the walls, forming faces of patients long gone. The whispers crescendoed into a scream. Stay, stay, never leave. I knew then that this was the heart of the hospital's power. If I entered, I would be trapped forever, a new shadow among the many. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the pull of curiosity and fear forced me forward. Stepping into the operating theater, I felt the temperature drop sharply, my breath forming clouds in the icy air. Shadows coalesced into more defined shapes. Patients, staff, all faceless, their forms twisted, frozen in expressions of fear and pain. The child floated above the central surgical table, whispering my name, its voice warped and hollow. "You belong with us." I tried to step back, but the floor seemed to ripple like water, each movement delayed, distorted. The walls pulsed as if alive, closing in, and the shadows advanced slowly, deliberately, circling me like predators. The whispers became deafening, overlapping into one cacophony that vibrated in my skull. Panic surged, and I felt the grip of unseen hands tugging at me, pulling me toward the table. It was then that I understood. The hospital didn't just trap people. It fed on fear, twisting reality to claim new souls. I had to escape, or I would become another faceless whisper, lost forever in the corridors. I forced myself to move backward, keeping my eyes on the floating child and the writhing shadows. The floor seemed to twist under my feet, every step echoing in a way that disoriented me. The whispers had become a deafening roar. "You will stay. You will join us. Forever." I saw a faint beam of light coming from a side corridor, the exit. Summoning every ounce of courage, I sprinted toward it, ignoring the tugging hands and shadows that tried to grab me. My flashlight flickered wildly, casting the figures into grotesque shapes that seemed to reach farther than physically possible. I could hear the echoes of footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, following my every movement. Finally, I burst through a door into the freezing night air outside. The hospital loomed behind me, dark and silent once more. I didn't stop running until I reached the street, where normality returned. But the terror remained. Even after escaping, the hospital's presence never left me. I couldn't explain what I had witnessed. The child, the faceless figures, the twisting halls that seemed alive. Friends asked if I had imagined it, but the scratches on my arms and the frost forming on my clothes told me otherwise. Months later, I returned to the area cautiously during the day. St. Mary's Hospital stood as a decrepit ruin, windows broken, walls decayed, and no sign of life. But I knew the truth. Inside, something beyond human comprehension waited. It thrived on fear, bending space and reality to claim the curious and the brave. I never returned at night. Sometimes, when passing nearby, I swear I hear faint whispers on the wind, calling my name. The hospital didn't just haunt Vancouver, it haunted me, a shadow in my mind that will never fade.